Iconic filmmaker Edgar Wright has given an update about a sequel to one of his most iconic action films of all time. And also, DCU has wrapped filming on one of its projects slated for September 2026. And also, we'll be delving into a dire situation about the Ghana's film industry, that is Black Star Films. These and more is what we'll be talking on about right here on the Film Mandate. My name is Papa Otu. Stay tuned. Hello and welcome back to the Film Mandate, where I bring to you movie news, reviews, and reactions, both from the African front and the international scene. And thanks for joining me for this exciting episode of the Film Mandate. So we'll be delving into the very first story. And Baby Driver is one of the most, riveting and entertaining films you can ever watch from filmmaker Edgar Wright. And it released somewhere in 2017. And with its release, the dramatic, sequences, the action, the comedic elements, the editing to the music and the beats and the score was so exciting and a refreshing film to watch in that particular season. And definitely the film went on to be very, very successful in terms of box office returns. And when you look at the budget compared to the box office, it was quite an exciting film to watch. Well, it's been almost 8 years, and the possibility of a sequel almost seemed but lost. But well, now we've gotten an update from Edgar Wright himself stating that, well, the script to the Baby Driver, the movie I'm talking about is Baby Driver, is actually being written, and yet there are other challenges perhaps preventing it for it being made. The question here is that, will the Baby Driver movie 2 or the Baby Driver 2, the sequel to Baby Driver, be greenlit, be made? Well, let's take a brief look at an article published in the on the Movie Web website, and this is what it had to say. The Edgar Wright offers update on long-awaited action sequel starring not one but um, two actors whose careers are in a quite a downturn. So let me just go briefly to what Edgar Wright had to say. So Edgar Wright, the renowned filmmaker behind films like The Last Night in Soho, Scott Pilgrim, and the Scott Pilgrim versus the World, and this year's adaptation of the Stephen King novel, The Running Man, has addressed the possible sequel to Baby Driver, his 2017 action thriller blockbuster. The original film features an A-list cast including Jamie Foxx, John Hamm, Ezra Gonzalez, and Lily James. And the problem is that both the film's lead and its villain were played by now cancelled actors Ansel Elgort and Kevin Spacey. Let's move on to what Edgar Wright had to really say. Pardon me. So, why am I missing this? Okay, so this is what Edgar Wright himself had to say. He said, there is a script for Baby Driver 2. Let me just highlight it so you know what I'm talking about. So there is a script for Baby Driver 2. That is something that actually exists. But most filmmaking depends on factors beyond you: timing, financing, who's available. You are not always completely in control of those things. And this is what the Edgar Wright had to say with regards to the potential making of Baby Driver 2, the sequel to Baby Driver. So indeed, it is one of the films that is so entertaining, and to get a sequel be so exciting. As a matter of fact, if you read other articles, he stated that he started working on this script since 2018, and that is like a year after the screening, or the screening or exhibition of the film Baby Driver. And Baby Driver indeed is such an entertaining, refreshing film that honestly, getting a sequel to it will be quite exciting to see, because looking at the filmography of Edgar Wright, all his films are very upbeat, entertaining. One of the things that makes his film is quite exciting is how he's always able to edit to the beat, to music, and it's quite an exciting film to watch. But now, this particular film, though it's been successful, looking at how it did well by, grossing, it became both a critical darling of critics and audiences alike. And it went on to make $227 million on a budget of $34 million. So, as a film in itself, it is very successful in terms of what it was able to make, comparing it to the budget it used in producing it. So obviously, the studios will be looking at making a sequel to Baby Driver. But a major challenge, as already stated by the article, is how the careers of Ansel Elgort and Kevin Spacey seems to be in a challenge as a result of certain accusations leveled against them. And so this indeed has sort of put the production in some sort of, uh, I don't know whether the term to use is gridlock, but I would say production hell rather than say development hell. Well, perhaps a development hell because the script is written, but the pre-production hasn't begun on it because there's no green light, an exact green light on it yet. And I'm sure they're trying to navigate whether audiences will be receptive of Ansel Elgort and Kevin Spacey. So that is where the challenge lies at this moment. And if you read that article, it looks like Ansel Elgort has read the script and is excited to get back on it. But the current status of it now, just as Edgar Wright had said, whether there are multiple of factors. Perhaps the issue of the actors are not just the main hurdle that he has to, circumvent, but the other hurdles are also time and financing. I mean, things that stated. He is behind the scenes and definitely may know what may be the reasons to it. But it looks like per this article, per the story highlighted, perhaps the major hurdles are the two main actors who perhaps were the front and center of this production's career, maybe the bigger challenge that is facing this particular production. And I can guarantee that if perhaps that has not been the case, I'm sure this production perhaps might have been greenlit already. But we would have to wait and see whether perhaps time has passed enough for audiences or for those who may be grieved against these actors be receptive of them. So those are the challenges that we are yet to see whether that may go through and have them, return to star in this production. Even with the way the film is written, especially with the Ansel Elgort's character being the titular character for the film, Baby Driver, it may be difficult to switch, him to replace him with another person. And particularly looking at the performances he delivered, which was spot on, which was, very good, it may indeed be quite difficult to see another person that role. That's not to say other actors cannot, play such a role, but he did it so well that you would want to see him play that role, and also the chemistry between him and Lily James, who is poised to return. She's so poised to return. I'm sure getting another person to play that role will be quite maybe jarring to an extent, for lack of a better expression. So honestly, this indeed may be a challenge now, but hopefully, maybe time has passed and maybe they've paid for um, the consequences enough. I actually do not even know the scope as to what that's the gravity of their actions may be. And I'm sure studios are concerned. Maybe the studio is concerned that their actions may be may take a toll on the production if it ends up not performing well. And seeing how the first one performed, definitely it means that the budget for this one may go a little bit more up, with the actors perhaps demanding a little bit more for their fees. So it may cost the studio much more if this production is made and then ends up not performing well. And so that indeed has become a challenge for this production. But well, it looks like perhaps all the Lily James is poised to return. Now the question would be whether Ansel Elgort and Kevin Spacey would be able to return. That is yet to be seen. So let me know what you think. Given the off-screen controversies that is happening, how should Edgar Wright and the studio, handle the cast for Baby Driver 2? Recast, write them out, or write around them, or move on entirely? Whatever your thoughts may be, kindly leave it in the comment section below. And talking about productions, well, one of DCU's production or titles that is being looked forward to with a different tone, I mean, different tone entirely from what we've seen of Superman and Creature Commandos, is that of Clayface. And now Clayface actually has finished shooting its production, and with the main actor or the lead actor sharing a picture online to indicate that it's been wrapped. Well, Clayface is one of the productions that indeed would have to, when perhaps released, would prove whether the tonal differences for DCU will serve the entire cinematic universes that burst. And therefore, indeed, it is something that I think audiences are eagerly waiting for. And looking at what the line of films that perhaps may precede it, we're going to have Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, be releasing prior, together with Green Lanterns, and then it would be followed up by what's it called? By it would be followed up by, pardon me, yeah, sorry. Then it would be followed up by, what's it called? The Clayface. So quickly, let's take a look at an article that talks about the wrap of production on the set of Clayface. And this is captured in the Yahoo website. And this indeed, pardon me, and this is what the article says. That DCU, sorry, let me cancel this. DCU's horror movie filming gets exciting news from lead actor. And this is what it says, that James Gunn and DC Studios' latest addition to the DCU, Clayface, has reached a major production milestone. Star Tom Rice Harris offered fans a glimpse behind the scenes with a new photo from the set of the horror-driven Batman villain movie. Tom Rice shares Clayface filming wrap photo. Tom Rice Harris marked the completion of filming on DC Studios' upcoming Clayface. He shared a new behind-the-scenes photo on his Instagram story. The image, later reposted by DC Film News, shows Harris sitting beside a crew member outside a decorated trailer with the word rap written across the picture. Inside the trailer, balloons, drawings, and handwritten messages such as are you going to leave me? And do you know what paradise is are visible on the walls. And that is the post shared by DC Film News concerning the rap of the of Clayface. And I mean, that is quite exciting to know because seeing the hectic kind of schedule they are keeping, Clayface is supposed to release somewhere September, or actually on September 11th, 2026. And therefore, I mean, we are almost wrapping the year 2025. And it looks like we have I mean, less than a year to complete it. And looking at this particular production comparatively to Superwoman, Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, it won't be visual effects heavy compared to that, but obviously it's still going to be um, intense visual effects and other things that will go along with it. And looking at this particular production, it would mean it being horror may indeed bring in some elements that will be quite different from all the roster of films that we're going to see or we have seen so far of what's it called, the DCU films, and therefore would indeed be perhaps tonally, I mean, it being tonally different, I'm sure they want to work on it and make sure that everything works as perfect as they will or hope for. And therefore, I think indeed they completing it way ahead of time. It's indeed a good thing for them. Um, for this particular production, it's a lower budget horror movie, so just as I have said earlier on, it's not going to be as visual effects driven heavy, even though the character itself, that is, if they're going to go full blown comic booky, it's likely going to involve some heavy, visual effects with regards to Rice Harris character, him being able to morph into other, or take on the image of other people in himself. So that is what we are yet to see. But looking at the fact that they are going very low, the budget of $40 million, the question would be, are they going the route of the Joker, where it was very grounded and had its own tone? And it also, begets the question that, with a lot of talk around that the Batman movie won't work well with the Superman, the kind of tone that James Gunn has set for the DCU. The question now is, with this being tonally different from the Superman movie, it, how it, how well is it going to meld together? And if it's able to meld together, does it prevent them from melding that of the Robert Pattinson's Batman to that of what James Gunn is doing? Because that is also tonally different. That is grounded, so grounded in reality and grim and dark and gritty, which definitely the Batman character is particularly known for. So those are questions that perhaps we may not be able to answer till perhaps finally we get to see the film and attest to whether it did work. And if it did work, I mean, would they be able to bring in what's it called, Robert Pattinson's Batman to play off David Cornsworth's Superman? So those are questions perhaps we'll be asking when finally this comes. But if the tone seems to fit perfectly, even though different to the template that James Gunn has set, then that will be quite an interesting, different horror we'll be looking at. James Gunn is said to, I mean, is said to have said that this is a pure, effing horror film. So pure effing horror film, comparing it to that of The Fly, which is quite, I mean, a gruesome horror film to watch. So then it means that it's going to be quite tonally different from that of the Superman movie. The question would definitely this indeed I think would the question now I don't know, maybe I may be mistaken here, correct me in the comment section if that is the case. This is supposed to be in the DCU. So if it's supposed to be in the DCU, I know what's it called? Matt Reeves was on board to help produce this particular production. But then the question then would be, um, if it's a pure horror movie to the fly and it is that gruesome, how does it fit in the scheme of things for the DCU? Or is it a film that is going to work in Matt Reeves' Batman and not that of David Consworth's Superman, DCU? So those are questions we need to ask. But definitely, what we know is that this is going to be in the DCU movie, and the concern of a tone, well, I'm sure James Gunn has a template and knows what he's doing, and it would work well. Him being an all-round filmmaker, I'm sure he knows how that would work well with the kind of vision he has for the film. So those are things we'll be taking a look at. But as we know, it's a hard R body horror thriller, meaning the R rated of a sort compared to the PG of Superman. So that would be quite an interesting thing to see. But if you know, it's something that we have to look forward to. We cannot be able to hazard a complete, close, perfect guess as to how well this film would work with the entirety of the DCU films. So we have the film stars Tom Rice Harris as Matt Hagen, and Matt Hagen is the Clayface character, and he is an actor whose face is disfigured and who undergoes a transformative experiment to make him better. So he is joined by Naomi Aki as the scientist and Max Minghella as a detective for this film. So that is quite exciting to see, seeing that they've wrapped the film. So let me know what you think. Are you excited for a DCU film that is a straight up horror movie, or do you prefer superhero, stories to stay in the action adventure genre? Whatever your thoughts may be, kindly leave it in the comment section below. And now, moving on from Hollywood and its stories, we now come to Africa to talk about one of the dire situations when it comes to even just filmmaking generally everywhere. And it has to do with funding. It has to do with funding. Well, one of Ghana's prominent filmmaker and producer, Socrate Safo, was on a TV show some time back and was, you know, shared his concern as to how funding for films has dwindled over the years in Ghana, to be specific. And this was captured in an article published in the Ghana website. So I'd like to read it briefly just for us to have an overview as to what this particular um, topic is about. So first and foremost, let's take a look at this article. It says that we went from Ghana must go bags full of money to $1,000 from YouTube, Secret Safo. Veteran filmmaker Secret Safo has reignited the discourse on the state of Ghana's movie industry, urging stakeholders to take ownership of the sector's decline rather than continuing to fault the government. Speaking in a recent interview on Hits FM, so pardon me, rather, it's a radio station, Hits FM, Safo reflected on a Facebook post he made about the film industry. He pointed out the industry's past glory days and present struggles. I have lived long enough to know where we came from, what's happened to us, and why we are where we are today, he said. He recalled times when people were carrying money in Ghana must go bags, contrasting them with today's scenario where filmmakers celebrate few $1,000 YouTube returns. I want industry to wake up and look within and stop thinking about government, government, government. Every law the industry needs to govern itself has been passed by government. It is up to us to wake up, he said. He specifically referenced the laws on copyright and the role of the National Film Authority, whose board, he says, is made up of practitioners and should be actively solving distribution, piracy, and revenue flow challenges. Government alone can't save the industry, Socrate Safo, on the creative arts sector. He argued that blaming ministers or presidents is missing the point, and that the NFA board, made up of practitioners, should take steps to solve the problems concerning the industry. We don't go to the minister, she is not the problem. We don't go to President Mahama, he is not a problem. The board is made up of practitioners. Let them analyze the challenges we are facing today. Do we have people who take monies and don't pay back? The law says there should be a distribution system. Have they fixed it? What are the systems they put up to for distribution? He asked. Safo questioned a roadmap by the government to ensure that at least 1% of Ghanaians watch locally made movies, pointing out that while over 70% of Ghanaians watch locally made films, filmmakers are not seeing returns. You say 1%. Okay. Explain to me why the 1%, because over 70% are watching already and we are not making money. What is causing this? We need thinkers now. We need people to think, analyze the challenge, understand the challenge, and analyze, he added. His commentary builds on earlier statement that ignorance and poor orientation have hampered the Ghanaian film sector. In June 2024, Safo said many entrants lacked proper training or understanding of the business side of filmmaking. With his remarks, Safo is calling for renewed self-governance and structural reform within Ghana's film industry rather than awaiting external rescue. And that indeed has raised quite some interesting questions that pertains to the film industry in Ghana, and I think it does really, make sense. A challenge we are facing, I must say, to the film in the film industry in particular has to do with a lot of, the three main factors I always sort of, keep talking about: data, infrastructure, and then maybe now I should say enforcement of those policies that have been passed. So indeed, it is a challenge where now, back then, a lot of filmmakers or a number of filmmakers made money back from their movies. As to whether they broke even, that I cannot tell. But I think for some, they did break even during those heydays of the film industry. Maybe I would say particularly the early 2000s, maybe the late 1990s, they were making some money. But the challenge has always been that even with those films, the distribution wasn't that organized, because when you look at the nation of Ghana, there aren't a properly networked of cinemas all across the country. Most of those cinemas are populated in the major capital cities of Ghana, mainly Accra, and then you have some in Kumasi, maybe a couple or few in maybe Koforidua or maybe Takrade. But those, even as it stands now, we still don't have adequate cinemas to help distribute films on a larger scale to be able to recoup most of the funding for these films that have been invested in. So it becomes quite a challenge when these films are being made and only just some few amounts of money are made back. And for these reasons, this also informs the kind of production value any filmmaker would like to give to his films, particularly if they realize that the film would have to be put on YouTube, which may or may not, get the needed attention to enable the filmmaker to recoup their funds. So that, in a way, goes a long way to impede, I would say, proper progress for the film industry. And I like what he has said. For what he has said, he did highlight on a number of issues, which indeed it's perhaps the major thing we need to pay attention to. The success of every film industry the world over relied mostly on the stakeholders or private hands. Let me put it that way. Governments in no way can build the industry. Yes, with the passing of policies and things to help incentivize the industry, it will go a long way. So, in to an extent or to a percentage, indeed, if the government implements certain policies like tax incentives and other, stuff to help, it would attract, more filmmakers or even investors to want to go into the business of filmmaking. But the key to our problem is that even when films are produced, where do you distribute them? Where do you showcase them? And that becomes a challenge. And you can't rely on the scanty, in terms of the numbers, the scanty cinemas we have in the country to say you can make your money back. That is why personally I always advocate, or I am a big proponent of of a continental film, distribution network across the continent of Africa and even the diaspora. Because even if we can make our monies back, can you imagine the margin of profits we can make if we can distribute, or not just in the country of origin of the films, but across the entire continent and even in the diaspora, whether in the Americas or Europe or any other place else. So these are challenges we are faced with. And he spoke about the fact that, I mean, South 70% of Ghanaians watch films, and yet they watch Ghanaian films, and yet they are, who is responsible for returning the money. I'm just paraphrasing. The challenge I have is that we don't have accurate data to pinpoint as to whether the 70% are truly watching Ghanaian films or they are watching foreign films. So these are quite a challenge. And even if 70% are watching, on which platforms are they watching? Are they watching it in the cinemas? Are they watching on social media? And which platforms are they watching it on? And are those platforms monetizations good enough for the films to make their money back? So there are so many questions that we cannot answer because there aren't proper data collated to pinpoint as to some of the challenges we are faced with. Because Socrate Safo went on to ask a number of pertinent questions, but these questions cannot be answered in isolation or in vagueness, because you need to possibly identify where the indicators are to know whether the 70% are truly watching Ghanaian films. Yes, a number of them are watching Ghanaian films or on television, but the nature of television is that it won't monetize. So the television can only pay for the screening rights of the film in their country, and those screening rights are quite scanty, I must say. So in that case, the question would be, would that be enough to potentially, make money back for the filmmakers? Those are questions that perhaps we cannot answer. But then, if we take a critical look as to what some of the questions that Socrates Safo asked, which I would like to bring back onto the screen, he did state a number of things that I think perhaps need possible answers to. Pardon me. So some of the questions were, what is causing this in terms of the 1% target that NFA has stated? I think the idea as to percentages needs to be clearly taken a look at, because we can't just be throwing percentages of numbers when we cannot. I don't know whether I mean I stand corrected, but I don't know whether the percentages of numbers can be proven with data, with hard facts data, and that is a challenge. And it's quite difficult. You know, Socrate Safo in the perhaps is in the ex-Wild government may have been part of the NFA. I may be mistaken, but for some reason, if it's throwing out these percentages, there should be some reason or a support to that regard. So these are questions that we need to ask ourselves. What is causing this? Yes, these are questions, but I think the major challenge is that we need to organize our data properly to be able to pinpoint these challenges. These challenges cannot be addressed in abstention of hard facts data, because it is only by having the hard facts data that we can properly address this problem. Most of that, it looks like what we are doing now may be simply throwing spaghetti to the wall with the hope that things may work. And whether that is the best way to approach it, I don't think so. And therefore, the three factors I always talk about, I think we need to really take a critical look at it and work on it to make sure that this industry work. The industry can't work if all we talk about is data that we cannot prove or infrastructure that is non-existent, and yet we are churning out movies. We can churn out all the movies we want, but then if we make all these films and we only end up putting it on a streaming platform, or maybe on a YouTube, which is also a streaming platform, or any other platform for that matter, it's not really going to augur well for the industry. One of the things that we cannot take out of the equation is theatrical releases. There is no way an industry will perform well or will do well in a country if we do not have a proper theatrical release for a film. Because most films, as we have seen, if you ever want to even know how the industry works well, most films like released in the United States have what's it called? There's the box office mojo, which showcases which films made their monies back in the first weekend, second weekend, and so forth. So those are able to pinpoint some of the monies being made. And also, we live in a culture where I don't know whether we don't do much for the films we produce. And even if we do much for the films we produce, most of those merch like t-shirts are meant for promoting the film by the filmmakers themselves, because they have to go on a float to distribute flyers and stuff. So it becomes quite a challenge. Whereas in other cultures, the merch are actually sold to augment the perhaps the total cost of production and promotion and other stuff. So those are challenges that we really need to pay attention to. I like the fact that he's made this statement, and this discourse had to be, it has to be ongoing. But I think, just as he said, I like what he said in this article, that we can't lay the blame on government. Maybe not the blame on government alone. The stakeholders in particular has to be up and doing more than perhaps the government is doing. And I think I can understand his statement. It starts with the private sector, and perhaps we need to see how best we can pull out data, hard facts data, to prove to investors that the industry is viable. Without that, I don't think we can be able to attract any well-intended investor who really is in for profit, and therefore that will be a challenge. So it is indeed a good concern that he has raised. Now the question would be, can we find answers to these challenges? Those are questions we need to ask ourselves. So what do you think is the biggest barrier to growth for film industries in countries like Ghana, and is it funding, distribution, or competition from Hollywood? Whatever your thoughts may be, kindly leave it in the comment section below. So all too soon, I've come to an end of this particular episode of the Film Mandate, and thanks so much for joining me for this particular episode. And I'll be coming your way as usual again tomorrow with another exciting episode of the Film Mandate. My name is Papa Otu, and I'll see you soon.